We're going to look at color correction with our studio portraits. We want to get that background to be a nice white, not a dark gray and things of that sort. It works best when you have a RAW file. CR2 is camera raw version 2. JPEGs, you don't have as much leeway because there's just less data available. So make sure it's a RAW file. Then I'm going to click and drag it into Lightroom to import that exact photo into Lightroom. And there's a silly photo of me in the portrait studio. First thing I'm going to do is crop a little bit of that extra stuff out. And then maybe even rotate it a little bit if needed. There we go. All right, so let me just for kicks, I like to click on auto to see what the program thinks is correct. The background looks a little bit better. Some of these shadowy areas look better. My shirt looks better, but I don't like how my face gets kind of red-ish. So I'm gonna do some manual edits here. I like to turn the histogram on. To turn the histogram on, you go up to Edit Panels, and the histogram is right here. I find the histogram very valuable. It tells me where the data is in the bright areas and the dark areas, and not just individual pixels and data, but actually the RGB data. So we have a bump up there, that's the dark areas, and a big bump up here because there's so much bright white. That just helps guide it and do some other assistance things. So I am toning down the highlights, bumping up the shadows, reduce some shadowy areas. That helps with the shirt. White tones, I'm going to recalibrate the white tones. You can just kind of move it, but it's hard to see what is going on. So if you hold down the Option key, if you go towards the bright white, that's going to be way overexposed once it starts showing up there. So let me back it off and make it so there's almost zero of those data points showing. Black point, same thing. Make it so there's almost zero of those. And then you eyeball it to make sure those are right. Tone it down if it looks a little bit too harsh or something. So that is on me and the sign. That looks good. Now I need to improve that background a tiny bit. So I'm going to use the mask and say select the background. And this is where the newer versions of Lightroom really excel. If select the background, it shows up pink, but it's not pink. It's just showing you what's selected. When I click on something and start editing it, then that pink goes away. I'm bumping up the exposure. You don't want to go so far that you can't tell the difference between that white sign and the background, but I do want to just improve the color or the lack of grayness in that background. Contrast up a tiny bit. Just each photo is going to be slightly different. And just for desaturation, if it was a little bit gray, desaturation, or a little bit bluish or white, I'm sorry, a little bit bluish or yellow, desaturating it will reduce those hues. I think that turned out pretty well, and that is a keeper. So I will now export this as my large JPEG. Original is, I think, going to be the original pre-edited version. So go ahead and download a large JPEG wherever you see fit.